Good evening, welcome to the Mob Museum. Welcome to 2026. My name is Jeff Schumacher. I'm the Vice President of Exhibits and Programs here. This is our first program of 2026, and it promises to be a really good one. Thank you for braving the elements to be here. As many of you know, we cover a lot of ground with our programs, from the origins of organized crime to modern-day crime and justice topics. Tonight, we're going to focus on the here and now, how law enforcement at multiple levels is fighting crime in our community today. I'll briefly start by introducing our panelists, and then we'll jump right into our discussion. There will be time at the end for questions, but I want to emphasize that word questions, not statements, not stories. Hopefully, we can focus on the panelists and the answers that they can provide this evening. So again, the focus will remain on what they have to share with us. All right, so I'm going to introduce our panelists. On the far end is Christopher Del Zotto. He's a special agent in charge of the FBI's Las Vegas field office. He became a special agent in 2009 and was assigned to the New York field office, where he worked corporate and securities fraud matters. In 2017, he was promoted to supervisory special agent, where he served as a program manager for the FBI's criminal division. As part of the criminal division's money laundering unit, he oversaw all the money laundering investigations in the South Central region of the United States. In 2021, he was named Assistant Special Agent in charge of the San Antonio field office, and he was assigned to the Las Vegas field office in 2025. Please welcome Special Agent in charge, Christopher Del Zotto.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Next to me is Andrew Walsh. He's the undersheriff for the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. Walsh began his career with the New York City Police Department. He's held several roles with Metro. He served as a sergeant in patrol, the field training program, and the public information office. He then was promoted to lieutenant in the downtown area command and enterprise areas. He was appointed as the Internal Affairs Bureau lieutenant before being promoted to captain of the downtown area command, and we'll go back to that era in a little bit. He then became a deputy chief, overseeing the tourist safety and homeland security divisions. As an assistant sheriff, he directly supervised deputy chiefs, labor relations, internal affairs, and the Clark County Detention Center. Sheriff Kevin McMahill appointed him as his undersheriff in 2023. Please welcome Undersheriff Andy Walsh.
Thank you.
And in the middle is Mike Dreitzer. He serves as chairman of the Nevada Gaming Control Board. He was appointed to the position in 2025. Dreitzer brings to the position more than 25 years of experience in gaming law and regulation, and executive leadership. Dreitzer began his career as a deputy attorney general representing the Gaming Control Board and Gaming Commission. He held senior roles at Progressive Gaming, BMM Test Labs, and Ainsworth Game Technology. Most recently, he served as CEO at Gaming Arts, a startup gaming equipment supplier. As chairman of the Gaming Control Board, he leads the Control Board's regulatory efforts with a focus on modernization, transparency, and efficient oversight of Nevada's gaming industry. Please welcome Mike Dreitzer. Okay, so you can see we have a high-powered crew here. We're going to cover a lot of different areas of crime and justice in Las Vegas. We're going to try to keep the focus on Las Vegas. And I want to start with Special Agent Del Zotto. I'd like to, first of all, welcome to Las Vegas.
Thank you.
I know this is a relatively new assignment for you. What do you think of it so far?
I mean, there's nothing not to like. There's gambling, there's great weather, great people, so.
That's good to hear. Now, I want to kind of have you summarize some of the priorities of the Las Vegas field office and how your agents are addressing those priorities, if you can kind of just summarize.
Sure, so let's talk about the priorities first. So the way that the FBI at large is organized is into a couple of different silos, if you will. The first is the criminal side, right? And then the second silo, if you will, is the national security side, which really encompasses a couple of things: your terrorism mission, your cyber criminal mission, and then your counterintelligence mission, right? So foreign adversaries. So on the criminal side, our priorities in this new administration with our current director first and foremost is to crush violent crime. Following that is cartels. And I'll get into kind of each one and how we're addressing them locally. And I mean, the strategy locally mirrors what's being done nationally. Violent crimes against children is another priority for us. And obviously, public corruption and civil rights will always be a priority for the FBI. Now, in terms of how are we addressing those certain threats before I move over to national security. So when it comes to violent crime, I would say we're addressing that through an interesting statistic that we put out recently on our social media account here in Vegas. We arrested 50,000 people this year in 2025. 60% or 30,000 of those 50,000 arrests were related to violent crime, right? So that should probably highlight to you how important that is to the current administration and our director. We're surging a lot of resources to that, but we could only disrupt violent crime if we have our local state partners involved in that one. What I mean by that is task forces. So obviously Metro's up there, huge partner with FBI Las Vegas. We can't do what we do without them, for sure. North Las Vegas, Henderson, for sure. So those task force efforts to combat violent crime are huge, and that's how we'll continue to disrupt that activity. In terms of cartels, there was an executive order put forth by this administration to create what we call the Homeland Security Task Force. Again, the operative word being task force. So that's a task force environment using local, state, and federal agencies to target cartel activities. Here in Las Vegas, we see two cartels primarily, which is Sinaloa and CJNG. And then moving down to violent crimes against children, again, it's a task force environment. And unfortunately, when it comes to violent crimes against children, it's probably one of our our highest operational tempos, if you will. There's a lot of that activity, not just here in Vegas, but unfortunately throughout the United States. And then public corruption, civil rights, you really have in all areas of responsibility or all field offices. This is an interesting city when it comes to public corruption, because there's a lot of ways to launder money, obviously, casinos being unfortunately one of the ways, but we see all the different typologies, whether it's use of casinos, real estate, your front your front company. So that's the criminal side. On the national security side, looking at cyber, ransomware is certainly an issue. It's very profitable for the cyber criminal actor, and then on the national security actor it's also very involved in ransomware activities. We're tracking currently about 130 ransomware variants that are actively indexed in our investigations. Terrorism. All the players that you're probably very aware of, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Hamas. But when it comes to terrorism, at least locally, I think the domestic terrorism threat is the priority of the day for us. And what I mean by that is, especially here, and I'm sure the undersheriff will talk to this maybe as well, is underage radicalized youth that become radicalized online is a huge challenge for us. It's tough to prosecute these subjects at the federal level, and they're often kind of lone wolf targets that make them difficult to identify. But that's certainly a target. And then last, on the counterintelligence side, China is a huge challenge for us. You read about it in the news. There's no lack of targets, Chinese IOs in this area of responsibility. When you're talking about 11,000 events here when you're talking about conferences and special events. Like right now we have CES going on. I mean, there's all sorts of known foreign intelligence officers that gather and target events like that, specifically here in Las Vegas. So that's kind of the threats that we're focused on. It's a lot, and those are the priorities as well. So.
Oh, that's a great summary. Thank you for that. So we'll circle back to some of these topics. I want to give each of our panelists a chance to sort of summarize what they're working on, and then we'll circle back. So, Under Sheriff Walsh, you have some similar priorities and some that are different. Can you kind of talk about some of the things? I know traffic-related deaths are a big part for Metro right now, a big focus.
Yeah, we had over 160 people killed just in our jurisdiction in traffic fatalities in 2025, and that's a staggering number. And I know probably everybody here drove tonight and probably saw some example of why we're dealing with those numbers just in the behavior of people around us. And it really is a challenge because we wrote almost twice the amount of tickets last year that we did the year before, and we still saw the number go up. So, the lesson is it's not just enforcement that needs to be done to get that number down. And, that's 163 families impacted by somebody leaving their home to go to work, go to the store, go somewhere, and they never came back because of the bad driving of others. And that just should shock all of us, that statistic. And statewide, the number continues to go up. And there's a variety of reasons, but that is a priority for the sheriff and for us moving forward. And the violent crime and the shootings and the things that really have traumatic effects on neighborhoods is another focus for us. And it's hard to say that we had a successful 2025, but when the sheriff took office 3 years ago, in the previous year, in 2022, we had 153 murders, and that number was down to 87 last year. So 87 is still a lot of murders, but it's the first time in over 10 years that we were under 100, and it's the first time in my memory of being with Metro for as long as I have that I can remember it being under 90. So, but murders and shootings are always a priority for us, and community relationships and community partnerships are also very important to us. And as Chris said, the Homeland Security front is the one thing that keeps us all awake at night as well, across all police departments, federal, local. We have an iconic city, an iconic tourism destination here, and that is the one thing that is always on the forefront of our mind, is protecting our community from some type of a terrorist attack, whether it's a domestic attack or whether it's an international terrorism. But
a couple of things I want to go back on the traffic thing. So one of the things that I think we talked about briefly was the idea that there's a lot of traffic tickets being issued, but the penalties don't seem to correspond.
Yeah, not to turn this into a debate about the changes that were made at the legislature, but I think we're seeing that has to be considered. That's one of the major changes that was made, where a lot of the violations that we write citations for are no longer criminal. They're not considered criminal citations. And so when there's a court appearance date, you have a judge and you have an attorney for the person who was cited in that event, and but you don't have anybody from representing the interest of the people other than the judge there deciding what the penalty is. There's no argument from a prosecutor because they're civil infractions. And so the penalties are very minor. We've sent people to court to sit in court, and be honest, I'm not pleased with the disposition of a majority of these cases when people are cited for reckless driving, but and for things that we write tickets for the high speeds, and but that's the hand we've been dealt, and so we have to work within those parameters and try to find a solution, because the court and citations isn't the solution.
Yeah. And on a related note, I know this is, just there's a vigorous discussion around traffic cameras, but I know the sheriff was an advocate of traffic cameras being allowed, and that did not pass.
Yeah, it didn't pass. It didn't even get a hearing, and the frustrating part of the conversation is when you talk to the community about it and you talk to electeds about traffic cameras, it becomes almost a paranoia type thing of Big Brother watching, and then it turns into a discussion about what are we going to do with the revenue. If there's tickets that are issued, and the sheriff said, I don't care what you do, you decide what to do with the revenue. Metro doesn't need the revenue. You can create driver's ed programs for young drivers if that's what you want to do with the revenue. Do whatever you want with the revenue. And by the way, if they work, this is the other part of the discussion that is kind of frustrating, but if the cameras work and people know there are cameras out there and you change behavior, there will be no revenue. So you don't have to worry about what to do with the revenue if people behave and drive appropriately. And if you go to any city that has it, I was in New York 2 years ago, and you drive in, if you use the map app on your phone, it tells you speed camera ahead, red light camera ahead. You get a notification on your phone, so it changes the driving behavior. I know I slow down, so.
Well, very good, thank you. We'll come back to a few other Metro-related things in a minute, but Chairman Dreitzer, I want to talk about the Gaming Control Board. I mean, you focus on some different kinds of things than Metro or the FBI. But let's hit a few of the topics that have been in the news lately. So a big one is the money laundering challenges in the casinos. And several local casino companies have recently faced some significant fines for not complying with anti-money laundering regulations. Can you kind of just, I know specifics might not be the thing, but can you kind of talk generally about that?
Sure. So I started at the Control Board about 6 months ago, and it was a very interesting time. As you correctly point out, throughout 2025, there was a whole lot of goings on when it came to the area of money laundering. And so I think on one hand, what you have to do from the standpoint of enforcement is to make sure that the licensees are following the rules, and if they aren't, that they are held to account for that. And that's where you see things like fines and structures to make sure that they change their culture of compliance moving forward, and they actually are better in terms of adherence. But the more important thing from my perspective is making sure that we look at our regulations to see what we can do to make it easier for in particular casinos to make decisions, credit decisions, about whether they can allow a player to play and figure out the source of funds. And that requires information sharing. So there's what's called the 314B exchange, which is frankly of limited use so far, but we're doing some things to change that. And we're introducing a whole bunch of regulations to try and get the licensees to have more information to make good decisions when it comes to money laundering. So it's something that's always going to be an issue, right? Because as soon as we figure out what's being done and how we can create a better culture of compliance, then they find the next way to launder money, and it's never going to end. But it's something that is critical and upfront and amongst my top priorities.
Some of the activity that led to these fines surrounded an illegal bookie named Matthew Boyer, who was linked to Shohei Ohtani's interpreter, if you remember. He gambled away millions of the baseball star's money. There was a really strong Las Vegas connection to that. I don't know if you can speak directly to that case, but what this illegal bookie idea in Las Vegas, how does that work? Or how did it not work, I should ask?
Well, as has correctly been pointed out earlier, there's a large opportunity because there's a lot of cash, and it's a big opportunity to launder money through casinos, and that's an old story. In certain circumstances, people have taken large amounts of money and come and spent the money, and to where that they might lose some, but at the end of the day, that's the cost of doing business, and they'll launder it through the casino. And so again, the focus has to be for the licensees to, of course, take it seriously and engage in the proper level of compliance culture. And it can never be profits above compliance. Yeah. And when you have that sort of mindset where you look away, where you do things where you are blissfully ignorant, head in the sand, that sort of thing, that's where you have problems. And so and that was one particular case, but there are others. And so it can be reduced and improved, but it's important that the licensees have better tools to make decisions about who they let play in their casinos, first of all, and they act with a better sense of culture of compliance. So that's what the last year has been about. There's been a lot of head turning, and people have noticed what the Control Board has done, and rightly so. And I think we're going to see casinos be more and more compliant about these issues and more mindful about what they need to do.
Good. Another topic that's been in the news are these prediction markets. Some people might have heard of this poly market. It's it's a website where you can make bets on the outcome of real world events. And 60 Minutes has featured this topic, and it's a topic for the Gaming Control Board, right?
Sure is.
At some point, we learned this week, right, that there was this man who bet $32,000 that the Venezuelan president would be toppled by the end of January. He won the bet and made $400,000 profit, although I understand he didn't end up collecting that. But this individual made that bet just hours before the president ordered the investigation, or the operation, I should say. So it makes you wonder, was he just lucky, or did he have some inside information? So what's going on with the prediction markets, and how does that relate to Nevada?
So just so you know, we have to be done before 8 so I can win money. But that, I say that as a joke, but that is an example of how random this is, and there's no security to that. And so there's a couple of things. So historically, there have always been these sorts of predictions, and typically it was in the area of like soybeans and other commodities. It was used as a financial hedge. Within the last couple of years, some enterprising companies said, hey, if we can predict the price of soybeans going up or down, maybe we can predict whether the Yankees will win or not. And that's governed, or ostensibly governed, through the Commodities Future Trading Commission. And so they started this process, and a number of these companies wanted to do it in Nevada. And we said, well, you can do it in Nevada, but you have to be licensed and you have to be taxed like every other gaming concern. But they said, we're governed by the CFTC and we're preempted from state jurisdiction. And so essentially what it is, it's an end run around state jurisdiction. So you have these prediction bets, these contracts that take place in all 50 states. And in Nevada, of course, we have gaming that's been regulated safely now for the better part of 70 years, and other states that have regulated gaming. Then you have states that don't have regulated gaming, like California, Hawaii, Texas, Utah. These are places where these prediction contracts are being taken. And if you look at the apps, they look exactly like sports books. It is sports betting. And so we take the position, as do many states across the country, that it's illegal. And so this is going to sort of wind its way through the courts. But it's unfortunate because there's examples in sports, and there's examples in these prediction contracts around, who will be Taylor Swift's bridesmaids. I saw that one. The Maduro one you mentioned. There was how long will the White House press secretary give her press briefing, and she ended right at 1:04. These sorts of things. And one really terrible example was the CEO of Polymarket. I'm sorry, I think it was Polymarket. I might be wrong on that. He basically, they take these bets as to whether they will say certain words. And so at the end of his quarterly report, he said, and oh, by the way, these words, A, B, C, D, so that someone could win. So as you can see, this is rife with fraud. And from our perspective, we've been regulating gaming for 70 years. And doing it well because there's a lot to it, and so there's no enforcement, there's no ability for any sort of player to get redressed with the Commodities Future Trading Commission, and so this is a real big problem for our community, and it's a real big problem for America because historically and properly, gaming has always been a state issue, properly regulated by the states, and the courts have said so, and yet we have this loophole that they continue to grow bigger and bigger through, and so it's a great concern.
I want to hit one more with you, Mike, before we move back to the others, and that's this is in the sports betting arena.
Sure.
So we've had news stories in the news recently about basketball players who allegedly shaved points or modified their behavior on the court to manipulate the results of a prop bet.
Right.
And there's a lot of speculation about, well, some of these prop bets are dealing with pretty like small-time players or obscure parts of a game, and so it makes it where you could manipulate the result. So is Nevada looking to modify its rules on prop bets? Are we looking to do something different there?
Well, the first thing I'll say is the reason that those plots were uncovered was because law enforcement worked with leagues and they worked with properly regulated sports books to be able to uncover that. So that's why that's important. In terms of what that has engendered is this full discussion about prop bets, certainly. And I think that there's different theories about that. It perhaps makes sense to consider limiting the prop bets to certain players and in certain games. So for example, to use a broad example, the Super Bowl, Patrick Mahomes, I think it's pretty clear that he's
Not this year, but go ahead.
Sorry? Yeah, right. A couple of years ago. The idea is that, you can do a prop bet on Patrick Mahomes or on whomever at that level because the integrity will be there. But perhaps not if it's a lesser player or a lesser league. And in fact, a lot of the fraud that we see when it comes to sports betting is in matches that are way off Broadway. Think, tennis in Turkey kind of thing, right? The fifth match of the day, because these individuals aren't compensated to such a level, so they are more incentivized to participate in this type of fraud. So I think that it's a lively and important discussion. I know that that would be a discussion to be had with the legislature and certainly with the entire gaming industry. And because of what's happened in recent weeks and months, we're having that discussion right now.
Thank you. Chris, I want to come back to you for a minute. And something that you and I mentioned when we talked ahead of time was about, you mentioned violent crime, and there's also the matter of violent fugitives, right? Nevada, or actually, and I'm sure Under Sheriff Walsh can speak to this too, but we have this criminal apprehension team, right? That has it should be more famous than it is, right? You're finding all these fugitives in Las Vegas. We seem to be a magnet for that. How does that work?
Yeah, so historically, Las Vegas, unfortunately, a lot of these violent fugitives from states, all states, but we see it mostly from Los Angeles. They flee where they're residing, and they come here to Vegas to kind of hide out, if you will. And so a couple decades ago, the FBI Las Vegas, along with its partners like Las Vegas Metro, Henderson, North Las Vegas, the Probation and Parole Department, gathered and created another task force called the Criminal Apprehension Team. And their job is to essentially go after the most violent of violent offenders. So for example, we had, I think it was in 2024, so it predated me, but I certainly was briefed on the story. There was an individual with a rap sheet a mile long. He was shooting at sheriff deputies in the state of Washington with an AR-15. He somehow was able to evade capture and wound up here in Nevada. So the criminal apprehension team was the team that went out and identified, located, and apprehended this individual safely. So those are the kinds of folks that they deal with. Just to give you an idea of their success, in this past year, they arrested I want to say it was almost 370 dangerous fugitives, which hit the goal. Our goal was on that CAT team to arrest one violent fugitive a day for a year, and we hit that mark successfully.
Andy, what can you say about that? I know it's kind of a priority, always a priority for Metro.
Yeah, I think Chris said it best. There's folks just seem to be drawn to here, and I think the story for me too is always when you read about these apprehensions and you read the level of violence that these criminals were a part of and the things that they were doing. It really makes you, I'm awestruck a lot at the abilities of these teams and the training and the partnership and the tools that it takes to go out and apprehend these folks successfully without any harm to the officers, without any harm to people in the community, and to bring them to see prosecution for the crimes they've committed elsewhere. But it's it's kind of interesting. It's like a bug lamp. They just say, well, let me go to Vegas and they're not going to find me there.
Well, and I have a sense, I'm just a hunch that they just don't know. They think they can get lost in Las Vegas, and it turns out we have the most sophisticated apprehension team in the country.
They can go anywhere they want, and they decide to come here, and that's fine, because no matter where they go, and it used to be like, oh, don't talk about our techniques or our tactics. They take out their phone and they document where they are. It's pretty simple, right? And even if they go quiet for a week or two, that's about as long as it lasts. And then we figure out who their friends are, and they're going to reach out at some point to somebody, and we go, "Thank you, we found you." You just turn yourself in. It's easier.
You know, you mentioned, both of you mentioned technology as a way to sort of find these folks. And I want to talk about technology a little bit in all the different parts of what you guys do. The one that's in the news most recently with Metro is the drones, right?
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Are you in charge of the drones?
No, I guess they won't let me touch one, so I was using the airbrush yesterday to clean one off. They let me do that. So
what's the plan there?
Listen, there's so many things involved with the drone technology, and I think I'm going to be a little bit of a braggart here, but there's nobody in the country that's doing what we're doing with drones. The Drone Operations Center, and really it's Assistant Sheriff Dory Corin that the sheriff put in charge of this project, because Dory's a tech geek. He's got the Starlink. He's got all the, like, I can't download an app, so I probably don't want to be near a drone. But we put the right people in charge of it, and there's a variety of things that they can be used for. Number one is the concept is drone as a first responder. So these things can be deployed and get there faster sometimes than a police officer can. And then what it can do when it gets to a scene is give us a view from above, and it's not as expensive or as costly as trying to get a helicopter there as quickly as we can. But that drone can help save lives. It can help reduce officer-involved shootings if it's providing us real-time information from the scene of a violent crime or an active crime. Things that get out of hand sometimes, protest. It can be used in a variety of ways for us to have a bird's eye view before we get there, and that ultimately will save lives. It will reduce crime, but the advancements and the way we've gone about doing it. I mean, Chris took the tour, and it's an amazing thing to see because. I mean, I remember when we would do New Year's Eve celebrations here and work as a patrol officer on the Strip, and we didn't even have cameras, and now we have drones. Right. So it's going to be something that continues in law enforcement as a tool. It's going to, we're probably on the cutting edge of it, but other places will catch up, and I don't think they're ever going to be as good as how we have it, but it's a true program, and it's a true tool that can save lives.
Absolutely. So, Chris, you mentioned cybercrime and dealing with cybercrime. I know we've had other programs here at the museum in the past, dealing with that, and it's just I think, law enforcement has caught up, in many ways, with these cyber criminals, with the sophistication of the technology and so forth. Can you kind of speak to that a little bit? It seems like we're not completely caught up because ransomware continues to be a problem and so forth, but there's a big effort in that area.
Yeah, I mean, really, when it comes to cybercrime, it's not just about the arrest. Obviously, the goal is to arrest and disrupt these actors, but a large portion of what we do in this area is really education, right? Because you can't arrest yourself out of cybercrime. When I say cybercrime, I'm not just talking about ransomware. However, we are very focused on ransomware for a lot of reasons. I'm talking about identity theft, fraud. I mean, the list goes on and on. So we do a lot of outreach. In terms of our technical capabilities, I think that we do a very good job of kind of understanding the ransomware variants and implementing that in our outreach in terms of, hey, how do you patch your system? What are the tactics, techniques, and procedures, or TTPs, that you need to understand said company that was targeted to ensure that you're not targeted again? How do you back up your systems the right way? But I'll come back to what I said initially is, when it comes to cybercrime, I see it more as an education campaign because it's so prevalent. It's international. In a lot of cases, right, we can't put our hands and put cuffs on the actor because they reside in places like China or Russia or Iran, and obviously we can't execute operations in those countries. So.
Well, you make a good point too, which is a lot of times, even though technology is involved, the mistake that people make has to do with the human interaction, right? They're talked into giving away information that they wouldn't otherwise give away, right? And then suddenly that's it.
Yep, that's right.
So
good
it's a
cyber hygiene.
Very human thing that happens. Mike, I know when it comes to gaming control board, technology has become such a big part of of what you do. Can you just kind of speak to some of the trends within gaming regulation and gaming in general? I know, for example, that there's every time you have a new device, like a new gambling device, you have to license it, right? So you guys have to examine it, make sure it works, make sure it's right before you can allow it to go out in the marketplace.
That's right. Yeah, I actually have three good examples. The first one being gaming technology. Every slot machine you see, every bit of gaming technology you see on the floor runs through the Nevada Gaming Control Board technology lab, where we do review it and make sure it's safe, we make sure it pays right, make sure that it's not open to any sort of attack or any sort of fraud. So that's something that we do. One of the initiatives that I undertook when I started was to bring us closer to 2026. We had not been up with the times, and we weren't getting the latest and greatest technology in Nevada for the gaming floor, which ultimately hurts the patrons because they can't get the latest and greatest, and it hurts the casinos who can't have it for their patrons. So we've done a lot to modernize that. The other area when it comes to technology that's interesting as it pertains to AI, right? AI is something that is a tool that can be used in any number of areas, but in particular when it comes to anti-money laundering, right? When you talk about money laundering, you're talking about a huge volume of transactions, right? You're talking about millions of transactions, and to be able to manage such a big data set, AI is a very valuable tool to understand which of the transactions profile as something that could potentially be a problem. So that's something that I think we're going to see more and more. Our licensees use it, we use it, but in particular with money laundering, it helps identify proper patterns to figure out who we need to go after or look at, right, more closely. And then the other area is surveillance. I don't know if people realize this, but I would say that to the undersheriff's point, if we're the hot button and for moths to a flame for people, the casinos are the hottest part of that hot button, right? They like to come there. And if you look at the technology available in casinos from the perspective of surveillance, it's unbelievable. You could actually be on your phone just sitting randomly thinking you have some degree of privacy, but the reality is that surveillance can see what you're looking at on your phone and can identify that. It also, the facial recognition software is amazing, and so people who come in, we can find out if someone is supposed to have been excluded or if they've committed crimes or if they're wanted, all these sorts of things. And so I think that's another area that will continue to get better and better. But in terms of limited to no expectation of privacy in casinos, we're pretty much there. So keep that in mind the next time you're walking on a casino floor. It's also important to note that gaming is a privileged license industry. It's not a right like voting, for example. So what that means is when you get a license, we have a lot of ability to extract information and data from our licensees, which I know has been very useful to our law enforcement partners in state and federally. And so we enjoy a very strong relationship with our federal and state partners because we can get things pretty quickly, and we're certainly more than happy and very proud to be able to be a cooperative part of this in terms of the overall enforcement community. And so I think overall technology will continue to make all of this better.
Now, I want to mention one other thing in gaming control that it's actually, well, I guess it's not really a technology thing at all. It's a very old school thing, which is you mentioned excluded people. List of excluded persons, also known as the Black Book. When you go back to the first list that was issued in 1960, all 11 of those guys who were on the original list were mobsters. Today, it's not so much about mobsters, although there's one or two maybe who have some connection, but it's about other kinds of offenders. Can you kind of speak to the Black Book in 2026 and how you're using it?
Sure. So I would say the Black Book is an iconic tool, right? Those who don't know anything about gambling or Las Vegas, the first thing they will talk about is, what about the Black Book, right? People want to know, they've seen all those specials on A&E, they want to know about it. So it's a tool that is reserved for frankly, the worst of the worst, the individuals that have brought such ill repute on the gaming industry, they shouldn't get anywhere near a gaming establishment. And so obviously that concept was very significant in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and so on. And today it's still relevant, not necessarily for organized crime, but for certain individuals. And so we use it. In fact, if anybody's interested, next Wednesday there'll be a hearing you can watch on YouTube where we'll be putting an individual in the black book, or we'll be nominating, I should say, need to be careful, an individual for the black book. So it's a tool that still exists in modern day. And it's something that in a toolkit of many different things, it just is able to send a strong message to the community that certain conduct certainly won't be tolerated.
Absolutely. One of the things that this is Law Enforcement Appreciation Day tomorrow. And we're going to be celebrating that at the Mob Museum. It'll be free admission for law enforcement personnel. There'll be activities here around the museum where you can come out and meet people and do things. It's going to be really great. But in light of that topic, I want to be sure we can talk a little bit about this appreciation. So what I'm thinking about is what can we as citizens do to help people in law enforcement do your job? In other words, how can we help? Because there's I think we've heard a couple of times tonight, you can't be everywhere. You can't, you want people to be helpful as opposed to, I suppose, not helpful. Andy, how would you see that? How would you answer that?
I think there's so many things that I'm grateful for that we already experienced. This community has really embraced law enforcement, from all the jurisdictions that are here. But I think there's always room for, when young cops come up to me and say, hey, I was in a store and, people said, thank you for being here, or thank you for your service, like whatever term people are comfortable with, that happens a lot, and I think that that's always good. I think also, too, is that, we've been, from the time I hired on, sheriffs over the years have really been staunch supporters of the police and the community relationships and listening to the feedback. And so, if you have questions, get involved, be supportive of us in a way where you can be proactive. If you have a concern or you have a question, just be involved. And, we always listen to those things, because we also know that where we get our authority is from the community, and we've never wavered from that. So I think that's, just the young. We had an academy graduation today. That's why I'm in our dress uniform, and there were 2 kids that walked across the stage that don't look like they're old enough to, drive. Let alone we gave them guns and badges. And I said, "How old are you? Do your parents know you work here?" And you make a little light of it, but they're 21 years old. Right? And I think I always ask for people, if you want to support, just be mindful that I gave a badge today. The sheriff gave a badge today to 2 kids that are 21 years old, right? That's the law. That's where we're allowed to hire. Now, thankful that some of the kids are older than that, but that this is a person that's now going to be out in the community that is going to walk into the home of people that are probably a little bit older than him in most cases and try to solve their problems. What experience does he, we've put the problems of the world on the backs of 21-year-olds. And there's a lot of things wrong, and there's a lot of things that we do right, and there's a lot of things we can do better. You can talk about all the things, but the onus is always, the one phone number everybody knows is 911. And so I think the way to be supportive of that is when you see these young guys out there and these young women out there, just remember they're doing a tough job, and they signed up and they've dedicated their life to serve others. Please and thank you go a long way with those folks. And, I'm not saying buy their lunch or pay for a cup of coffee or whatever, but they always love that, But I also think, though, too, that, there's always going to be some controversy, right? There's always going to be some story that involves law enforcement somewhere, right? It's always going to be the front page above the fold. They can't wait for something to happen, whether it's in gaming, please, they sit there praying, please do something, right? So we can talk about it, right? Just don't get your facts just from one news source or another news source. Email me if you got a question. We're very transparent about what we do. So,
to your point, how many police officers do you have currently?
We have over 3,000 people that wear a uniform every day. We have over 6,000 employees.
So it's human nature that they're not perfect.
Far from it. Yeah, we're never. No, we're not. And that's the reality. But I think the way the dynamic is set up in our world is that the issues of society seem to always get put on the back of law enforcement. And the Clark County Detention Center, which is something that falls under our purview, is the largest. There's more mentally ill or homeless people in that jail than there are in all the other institutions across the state combined. And that's not a place, I'm here to tell you, that's not going to cure addiction. That's not going to cure mental health issues. So the paradigm has been put that on the backs of law enforcement. That's just one example of what is in the law enforcement sphere of control. And it's certainly not the place where we can address those issues. So when people bring up, well, we should do this, or we should have social workers that handle that, or I say, give it all to the fire department. They're not doing anything anyway. They can come take it. But the reality is that there's got to be a better model than asking a 21-year-old kid or somebody that's got, what the training that we've provided them, which I think is second to none, but it's 6 months of a police academy, 6 months of field training. By the time these young men today that graduate get out of field training, maybe they'll be 22, maybe a little bit older. They're not going to solve the problems that we're holistically trying to solve as a society and a community. And the ones I always hear about are mental health issues, homelessness. You saw it here on your drive here tonight, I'm sure, right? That shouldn't be a police problem. So think of those things, and if you're in a space in the world where you can do something about those things, we certainly are willing to work on those with people. But it's old that law enforcement is the answer to everything.
Yeah. Chris, I might ask you the same question. It's a little different at the federal level maybe than it is with a beat cop, on the street. But how can we help? How can we help law enforcement in your mind?
Yeah, I mean, it's actually very similar to what Andy was saying in that the FBI, much like most of our local and state partners, has very organized efforts to integrate the community with different efforts. So, for example, I was here 2 nights ago with our Citizens Academy alumni. The Citizens Academy is an FBI initiative which basically brings in members of the community from across all types of jobs and backgrounds and so forth, and kind of brings them through I would say, very similar to a college level night course where they come in once a week into our field. They apply to it, right? We select those folks. They attend these classes once a week for, I think it's 9-10 weeks. And in the end, they graduate, and we offer them an alumni association where we continue that relationship, like we did the other night right here at the Mob Museum. And that's our way of interacting with the community, right? And in that specific Citizens Academy Association that we have, it's not just about, sure, we do a lot of community outreach. Like for example, in the holidays, we did an event where we worked at a battered women's shelter and provided them a holiday experience. So a lot of community outreach, right? But it's also strategic in that when we bring people into that Citizens Academy, it's not coincidence that they represent a cross-section of critical infrastructure areas like, for example, healthcare, where we see a lot of fraud in Las Vegas and elsewhere, right? To give us touch points into those sectors, right? So there's a community element, there's a strategic element. We also have other organized efforts like InfraGuard, which specifically focus on attracting members of critical infrastructure, so water, energy. So when China is relentlessly attacking those points of critical infrastructure, we have touch points in those areas. So I would say, to answer your question, the citizens, the community in Las Vegas, those are open to the community, those structured programs.
Thank you. Bill, so in a minute, I want to open it up to questions. But before we do that, I want to ask Under Sheriff Walsh if he will look back to 2017 and talk about a very famous case that he was involved in, and that we actually talked about. A few of you here might remember we talked about it here at the museum. But this is the case of the murder investigation involving a mannequin.
Yeah. It's kind of old for me to keep talking about it, but because all right, so the story is this. In 2017, I was the captain of the downtown area command. It was starting the third year that I was there. And we had a murder that occurred. If you know where the Mulaski building is over here, there was a victim, his name was Dave Dunn. He had been beaten to death. He had a traumatic head injury and looked like he had been hit with a hammer or a rock, and he was found dead in the rocks by other homeless people when they woke up in the morning. And so this happens, and it was in January, and it's a whodunit. I have no idea. There's no cameras in that intersection. There's no surveillance, there's no video, there's no witnesses, and so we write that off as basically the suspect had to be somebody that maybe this person had a conflict with, and so, but then nearly a month to the day in February, we had a murder that occurred right across the street. And so if I wasn't a homicide detective, I was the captain of the area command, so I had a certain ownership of but the cases, the way policing is constructed, that's a homicide investigation. So no offense, they do great work, and we have a great closure rate. We've closed 95% of our homicides year in and year out, but they get very paranoid when you start touching and messing and meddling with their cases. And so the first thing they said was, don't start telling people you think these are connected, because they knew I was a little bit of an outlier when it came to, clearly they're across the street, it's two homeless guys, they're clearly connected. And the first guy that was killed was Dave Dunn, and the second guy was Daniel Aldape, or I had that backwards. Daniel Aldape was killed first, then Dave Dunn. Anyway, right across the street from each other, clearly they're connected, and I didn't want to get called to Joe Lombardo was the sheriff at the time, and the last thing I needed to get called to his office and get yelled at about two murders that occurred in my area command right across the street from each other, because it really was, I took on the responsibility that, homicide has the investigation, but the prevention piece of this falls on me. So we mobilized the whole area command. We did everything we could to try to canvass the area, find people. Anyway, so I came up with this wild idea that we could put a CPR dummy mannequin. We had life-size ones with legs, everything, and we dressed it up as a homeless person and put it back out on the same corner. And I didn't tell anybody we were doing it. The people that worked for me knew we were doing it. They all thought I was nuts. Then when word got out that I was doing it, clearly I was the dummy, because how is this ever going to work? And then almost a month to the day, a guy named Shane Schindler came back to the intersection with a hammer and attacked the mannequin with a hammer. And then tried to walk away, but because we had cameras set up, we had cops doing surveillance, he didn't get but 10 feet right over there on City Parkway, and he was apprehended. So now, what do you do? What do you charge a guy to hit a piece of rubber with a hammer? And so they take the hammer and they try to figure out if this is the hammer used in the murders. It's clean. There's not. So we put him in jail for carrying a concealed weapon. And then he claimed he was homeless. He denied any. He said he knew it was a mannequin. Denied. And the video is online. You can see there's the full version of it when you watch it. Like there's the video of him actually hitting the mannequin. There's always these short snippets that are out there, but the full 25 minutes where he's stalking this thing. And the detectives and the sergeant that worked for me at the time that really there was a guy named Brett Whitmarsh and a few other guys. They took this to a whole level. I mean, sleeping bag, boots. It was dressed up. You would not know that this was a mannequin. Anyway, we put him in jail, we get him out real quick so we can surveil him and see where he goes, and he went back to an apartment. We got a search warrant for the apartment, figured out pretty quickly that he had been buying hammers and then returning them to the Harbor Freight over there, Lake Mead and Boulder Highway. So if you have a hammer that you bought over near Lake Mead and Boulder Highway circa 2017, you might actually have the murder weapon. But he pled guilty to attempted murder. That was the deal that was negotiated. I personally wasn't happy with that. I would have preferred he was charged with murder, but the victim's family, particularly, I've kept in touch with the Aldape family over the years, and they were pleased and he was sentenced to 8 to 20 years, but funny, I believe he's eligible for parole this year, so it should be interesting. But the other interesting piece of that's never really been made public is that, the gift for all of you that are here tonight is he wrote to a reporter about a year or so ago and basically confessed to the murders and asked if she could help him get him a deal on Hallmark television and call it the Mannequin Killer. And but he completely out of his mind, crazy. But that was an interesting thing. And the way the law worked, and the reason attempted murder worked, even though it was a mannequin, is there's case law particular to our state that says it doesn't matter if the crime in and of itself is an impossibility. It doesn't matter if it's impossible to kill a mannequin. So it doesn't matter though, because the intent was to commit murder, and that's what he pled guilty to.
So many of your colleagues thought you were crazy to put the mannequin out there. What did they call you after you
Oh, I was I got made chief, so they called me chief. So I went from captain to chief.
Very good. So we want to take a few questions from the audience, and so we would ask you to raise your hand, and then our Deanna will come around with the microphone so we can hear you.
This question has to do with the cameras. Now, I'm involved in the community. I follow the legislature, and it's very controversial. But one of the statistics that people aren't mentioning is that it has approximately a 20 or 27% reduction in accidents and intersections. And I'm part of the Zero Fatalities. I'm a movement that we're trying to bring down fatalities. And the number one place where people are getting killed is on intersections, and the number two is lane changes. So, and then you just said today that now with technology, you're driving up the street and you're already seeing that there's a red light camera, so you're getting feedback. And I think that why aren't we mentioning the percentage of effectiveness? I think that's going to make an effect on the legislators, because they're clueless. I'm sorry to tell you, but, some of those guys we got up there.
I'm not going to argue with you.
Yeah, right. So why aren't we quoting statistics? Why are we just saying cameras, that we want cameras?
Yeah, I would tell you that all of that data has been made available to them, and the fact that it's not even something that got a hearing is interesting, to say the least, based on the data. There's contrary data to that. People will find stories that say, well, and the one that they always use is they pick Hackensack, New Jersey, which, okay, like compare that to Las Vegas. I don't know why you would do that, but they showed that the initial rollout of cameras increased accidents that were occurring now at lower speeds. I'll take a fender bender over a dead pedestrian any day, right? Sure. I would trade that. I don't want to see any accidents, but we scraped 163 people off the street last year, out of cars, right? And I think, there's always going to be a level of concern about where they're deployed, how they're deployed. I talked about how revenue is collected and spent, and we've made it very clear, like, you tell us where here's where the high accident intersections are. You tell us where to put them. Right, and that, I think, was, and the interesting thing too, what passed through the legislature, not during the special session, but prior to that, there's camera technology that's been authorized to put on the flashing school bus sign. Yeah. That got very little attention, but we actually have cameras, or we will, once that vendor and all that gets worked out with the school district, but that is actually cameras to catch people speeding past a school bus with a stop sign and a flashing red light. So it's already been embraced. And where are those school buses going to be? They're going to be all over the valley. So the idea or the argument that it'll be placed in areas that are economically suppressed or not, or minority communities, I would put one right at Sahara and Decatur. I would put a speed. I'd put red light. Because I guarantee you, before the end of the year, we'll have 2 fatals there. Yeah. Without a doubt. So I'm with you. You don't have to convince me that they're not paying attention. You can say whatever you want about the legislature.
Do you have another question?
Mike, I have a question for you. Las Vegas tourism has declined between 5% and 10% this past year, but the casino take is up 2.5% to 4%. Right. What do you think about that as a gaming control board? Can you tell me?
I think players have been less lucky. Certainly we're aware of those statistics. It does show that play is more concentrated amongst fewer people. Obviously, the core concern is the fact that tourism is down, and that there's a lot of reasons for that. But we certainly talk to our licensees quite regularly, and they definitely see a much brighter 26. In fact, one leading executive testified before us a couple months ago. He said he sees the calendar for convention business in 26 stronger than it's ever been. So we should be coming back. So what do I think about that? I think it's interesting. And it's not an uncommon situation where, particularly since COVID, where play gets more concentrated over fewer players. If you look at it, a lot of the casinos have taken out a lot of slots, and yet their win is still up. So you see a lot more concentration in play. So that's a trend that we've been seeing now since COVID.
I just want to point out, similar to the FBI Academy that you mentioned, Metro and the city marshals also have one. I had the privilege of taking it. It was a fantastic experience. But my question is for you. I'm curious. I think I read recently that the Metro had the lowest number of officer-involved shootings last year in history, or close to it. I'm curious what you think contributed to that and that success.
That's a great point. I'm glad you mentioned it. And we had 7 officer-involved shootings last year, and I believe that's over a 50% reduction. I think we had 16 the year before. We've had as high as 25. So there's a lot of things I think that contribute to that, and I always like to talk about our training and the things that we do, but a lot of these things are predicated by the behavior of people that we deal with. And we had 2 on Tuesday morning before 10 a.m. One involved a constable and one involved one of our younger police officers out there. So, and the behavior in these instances, the constable was attacked with a machete that was already used to cut someone's throat. So, really not a lot when he's the buzzword of the decade has been de-escalation. I don't know how you de-escalate a guy coming at you with a machete. There's a lot involved in that. And then the first one was the officer was responded to a call where a young lady had a gun pointed to the back of her head, and then they pointed the gun at the officer. So you have 2 in a 2-hour period, but then you have 7 for an entire year. So a lot of it's predicated on the training. When we can build more time into some of these events, that is definitely something that benefits us when we can slow these things down. Unfortunately, there are going to be times where we just can't do it, and so, I'd like to say that I'd love for that number to be 0, but we're very critical to internally of these events, like where were the opportunities for us to de-escalate it or slow it down and use other options. So I think those discussions help too, but and I think the other thing too is the people in the world that have created some of these, drones and the technology things. I think, we talked about the CAT team and the major violators team. If you haven't seen the videos that they have, we invested in a tool called the grappler. So we would be in these pursuits with these violent criminals coming from, where California, and we'd wind up in a pursuit and a chase, and they jump out of the car with a gun, and bad things happen after that. And with this grappler thing, it's a net that shoots out from underneath the car and wraps around the wheels of the back tire of the suspect vehicle. So it eliminates the pursuit. It eliminates the adrenaline rush that goes on with everybody involved in that. And car can't go anywhere. It's wrapped up. And so I think technology plays a big role in those things too. And look, the world is, it's crazy. Sometimes, like I said earlier, 2 within 2 hours, but, thank God the officers are okay in that, but the man that had his throat cut is still in critical condition. I mean, it's hard to say, but 7, yeah, we'll take it. But it'd be nice if that number was 0.
Andy, did you come up with that grappler too? Is that?
No, these guys went out and found it, and the sheriff found a way to budget for it and get it. We need more of them for sure, but there's videos of it online. It's an incredible tool.
Spider-Man thing.
Yeah.
Thank you. This question is for Special Agent Del Zotto. So I actually just came from CES, and so just being there and you talking about it as well, I was wondering, what is it like for your department to do research on crypto wallet issues when people get their hard-earned money stolen, when they're typically maybe investing in some crypto wallet or crypto coins that might not be credible?
I'm sorry, can you reframe your question?
Sure, yeah. Is it difficult for the department to research crypto wallet theft?
Is it difficult? So when I hear crypto investment fraud, it's when you look at our annual IC3 report, it's investment fraud is by far the #1 complaint we received on IC3.gov. So it is prevalent. Tracing it, we do have the capability to trace various cryptocurrencies. We have seized cryptocurrency in different wallets. That requires certain licenses with private sector partners that are costly. So there is a resource question there. There is a budgetary constraint there. But I think the thing I would flag the most when it comes to crypto investment fraud or the use of cryptocurrency, whether it's fraud or terrorism or whatnot, is a lot of those cases where they place, layer, and integrate money launder, and they use cryptocurrency as a facilitator of that activity. The specified unlawful activity is in jurisdictions we find mostly in Southeast Asia. So if you read about these scam compounds, for example, the challenge there is they're in foreign countries. They're in these scam compounds that operate these cryptocurrency frauds that I'm talking about. They prop up the local governments. So there's corruption. We can't necessarily operate in those countries. So is it challenging from that regard? Absolutely. I think it requires kind of a whole of government approach in that it's not just tracing and seizing cryptocurrency to disrupt it in that way, but it's also our government putting pressure on other governments that we know are corrupt, but they facilitate the activity. They allow the activity to take place in places like Cambodia and Laos and so forth, because it props up their government, right? So when you get, the fraudulent text on your phone that we all get asking to send crypto or what have you, a lot of that stuff, the overwhelming majority of that originates in Southeast Asia. So that does make it difficult for us in that regard.
Regarding traffic and pedestrian accidents, do you have any statistics showing or citing whether they're local, out of state? What kind of prevalence is that?
When I think of pedestrian, most of I don't have a percentage of it, but I think we had 60 pedestrians that were killed in car accidents last year, and I think the number of pedestrians that we determined were at fault for crossing outside of a crosswalk was reduced from the previous year, and I think that was about 35 or 40 if I'm remembering correctly. But my recollection of that is mostly locals. I think if not 100% were local people that were killed in those accidents. And it's a great point too, because that's the question we get asked a lot is about the pedestrian enforcement, and I looked at that data years ago, and even the years that we wrote the most pedestrian tickets that we could for something like jaywalking, for example, the number of pedestrian fatalities would go up. So it's really just behavior and decision making, but the reason I would think is that we see mostly of this as locals is because, in the tourist corridor downtown, for example, the city has made fantastic infrastructure changes, the cutouts for the bus stops and the different things that, besides law enforcement being involved, the infrastructure changes that they made, the engineering changes that have been made. The strip, Las Vegas Boulevard has the bridges, so you don't see as much pedestrian traffic, but where you do see pedestrian traffic, you have the bollards. Again, another innovation or engineering change that uses, modern things like bollards to protect pedestrians. Boulder Highway is another one where, you can mark it down. I'll have 5 or 6 fatals a year on Boulder Highway. That number plummeted last year because in certain segments of Boulder Highway, they put up fencing so it makes it impossible for a pedestrian to cross the street. And the pedestrian thing is really an important conversation too, because we're not a town that was built for pedestrians. Like, you're either on a car, or people have gotten the e-bikes now because it's less work than walking, but we've seen the increase in the e-bikes and the changes in the laws regarding e-bikes because, those people would have been pedestrians except the bikes made it easier. So we've seen an increase in those areas too, but no one's going to walk a half mile out of their way to get to a crosswalk when they can just run across Boulder Highway, for example. And Boulder Highway wasn't built for what it's being used for today. It was a roadway from the Hoover Dam to Fremont Street, basically, was really what it was. It was the motor lodges that it's still down there, but today it's apartment complexes and residences. It wasn't built for pedestrians, and there's a lot of other dynamics that go with that. But to reduce the pedestrian fatalities, I'll go out and write as many tickets as you ask me to, and have the cops go do that. It's behavior and it's engineering. Those are the two things that I think, and engineering changes are the biggest thing to change the number of pedestrians that are killed in our roadways.
So with that, I think we'll wrap it up for tonight. I want to thank our panel. They did a great job. Thank you guys for coming out to the museum. And please, it's Law Enforcement Appreciation Day tomorrow at the Mob Museum. Please consider coming out or encouraging others to come out and enjoy the museum. Thank you guys for coming. Thanks. Appreciate it.
Thank you.